Richard Caldwell's office smelled like expensive leather and broken promises. The morning sun cut through his floor-to-ceiling windows, casting shadows that made his smirk look even more predatory. "You're being unreasonable, Jane," he said, leaning back in his chair like a king delivering judgment. "Dylan is family. He deserves this opportunity." I stared across the mahogany desk at the man who'd built Caldwell Dynamics on my back. Dylan Caldwell, his 24-year-old son, sat beside him in a $3,000 suit, scrolling through his phone like this meeting was an inconvenience. The same Dylan who'd never written a line of code in his life. The same Dylan who thought blockchain was a new cryptocurrency and neural networks were something doctors used. "He needs 6 months of training to understand the Genesis framework," I said quietly. 6 months I don't have to waste." Richard's face hardened. "Waste? Jane, you've forgotten your place. Dylan will lead the AI division whether you like it or not. Train him, or find yourself another job." The words hit like ice water. 9 years. 9 years of 80-hour weeks, missed holidays, and building Genesis from a theoretical concept into the most sophisticated AI architecture in cybersecurity. 9 years of watching Richard take credit for my breakthroughs while I smiled and nodded from the sidelines. Dylan finally looked up from his phone, offering me a patronizing grin. "Don't worry, Jane. I'm a quick learner. How hard can coding be?" That did it. The last thread of patience snapped. "Fire me then," I said, standing slowly. My voice was calm, steady. "But understand this, without me, Genesis is just expensive hardware." Richard's laugh was sharp, cruel. "You're replaceable, Jane. Don't make me regret giving you a decade of opportunities." The security guard's name was Tony. I'd passed him every morning for 9 years, exchanged pleasantries about his grandkids, brought him coffee during late nights. Now he couldn't meet my eyes as he escorted me to my desk. "I'm sorry, Ms. Chun," he whispered as we walked past cubicles full of colleagues who suddenly found their monitors fascinating. "This doesn't feel right." I squeezed his shoulder. "It's not your fault, Tony." My desk looked foreign now, sterile under the harsh fluorescent lights. 9 years of my life reduced to a cardboard box. I packed methodically, my MIT diploma, the coffee mug from my first AI conference, the small cactus that had survived countless all-nighters. Around me, whispers floated like smoke. "Can you believe they fired Jane?" someone muttered behind a partition. "She built Genesis from scratch." Richard's voice cut through the murmur, cold and detached. "Revoke all her access immediately. Every credential, every permission. I want her digital footprint erased within the hour." I kept packing, my face neutral, my heartbeat anything but. There was no room for anger. Not yet. Anger was loud, messy. I needed precision. As I placed the last photo into the box, my fingers brushed something small and familiar taped to the underside of my drawer, a matte black USB drive, no bigger than my thumb. I palmed it casually, like picking up a paperclip. Inside that drive was something Richard didn't know existed. Something Dylan would never understand. The master keys to Genesis Core, the foundational architecture that made everything else possible. Without it, Genesis was just an expensive shell. I slid the drive into my jacket pocket and closed the drawer with the same deliberate motion I'd used to close my heart to this place. Traffic crawled along Madison Avenue. Horns blared in sharp bursts that barely penetrated the roar in my head. The city looked the same as always, food trucks steaming on corners, pedestrians weaving through crosswalks, glass towers scraping the sky. But everything had shifted. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, the cardboard box sliding on the passenger seat with every turn. Inside were fragments of a decade, but the real treasure sat in my pocket, warm against my ribs. My phone buzzed. A text from St. Vincent's Hospital. "Jane, your father's treatment plan requires immediate payment confirmation. Please contact billing." My throat tightened. Dad's cancer treatments, the experimental therapy that wasn't covered by insurance, I'd been carrying that weight quietly for months. Every extra hour at Caldwell was supposed to ensure he'd never worry about money again. Richard had just torched that future in under 10 minutes. I pulled into a quiet parking garage, killed the engine, and opened my laptop. The login screen for Genesis Core glowed against the car's dim interior. Username, biometric scan, private key authentication. Each step slid into place like tumblers in a lock. And then, home. Lines of code danced across the screen, a world that still belonged to me. Genesis wasn't just software. It was a living system, evolved over years of careful cultivation. Caldwell might own the hardware, the office, the brand name. But the soul of Genesis, the core architecture, the learning algorithms, the neural pathway mappings, remained tethered to me through a web of dependencies so complex that dismantling them would take years. I traced the edge of the USB drive in my pocket. Inside this little black rectangle was the quantum encryption key, the single point of failure that Richard didn't even know existed. A notification pinged, board meeting at 2 p.m. Live demo for Pentagon contract. Confirm system integrity. I almost laughed. Let them try. By 2:15 p.m., Richard was standing in Caldwell's main conference room, facing a table full of Pentagon officials and defense contractors. The potential contract was worth $1.8 billion over 5 years, enough to cement Caldwell Dynamics as the premier AI security firm in the world. Gentlemen, Richard began, his voice rich with confidence, today you'll witness the future of autonomous threat detection. Genesis AI. Dylan sat at the main terminal, fingers poised over the keyboard like a concert pianist. His Harvard MBA might not have included computer science, but he'd watched enough movies to fake it convincingly. Initiate full system scan, ordered General Morrison, a man whose patience was legendary for being non-existent. Dylan typed with theatrical flourish. For exactly 3 seconds, everything looked perfect. Genesis's signature blue interface loaded, system diagnostics ran, preliminary scans initiated. Then the screen went black. Not the blue black of a loading screen. The absolute black of a dead system. Dylan's fingers flew across the keyboard, panic seeping through his practiced composure. He tried restarting, rebooting, even unplugging the whole damn server. Nothing. Is there a problem? General Morrison's voice could have frozen lava. Just a minor glitch, Richard lied smoothly, though sweat was beginning to bead at his temples. Dylan, run the backup protocol. But there was no backup protocol. Genesis wasn't a simple program you could restart like a crashed browser. It was an ecosystem, and I had just removed its oxygen. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Richard's name flashed on the screen like a warning signal. Jane. His voice was tight, controlled fury wrapped in silk. What did you do? I was sitting in a coffee shop near Central Park, watching steam curl from my cup while the world went about its business. Around me, life continued, laptops hummed, conversations flowed, baristas called out orders. My world had narrowed to the glow of my screen where a single line confirmed what I already knew, Genesis Core offline. Quantum keys revoked. I didn't do anything, Richard, I said, stirring my latte slowly. I'm unemployed, remember? Don't play games with me. This is sabotage, industrial espionage. I'll bury you in litigation so deep. Check the patent registry, I interrupted quietly. What? The patent registry. Look up Genesis Core Architecture. Patent number US 118473992B2. The line went silent except for the sound of typing. I could picture Richard's face as the truth dawned on him, the color draining from his cheeks like water from a broken dam. That's impossible, he whispered. Filed 3 years ago under Chen Innovations LLC. Registered owner, Jane Chen. You never owned Genesis, Richard. You licensed it. And the license just expired. I ended the call and closed my laptop, savoring the quiet hum of the coffee shop. Somewhere uptown, Richard was learning that his billion-dollar empire was built on sand. The call came at 4:47 p.m. from Heather Walsh, Richard's head of legal. Her voice was carefully neutral, professionally desperate. Jane, we need to talk. Richard would like to discuss revised terms for your employment. I was back in my apartment by then, laptop open on the kitchen counter, watching the digital carnage unfold in real time. Caldwell's stock had dropped 8% since news of the failed Pentagon demo leaked. Tech blogs were calling it the Genesis meltdown. Dylan had disappeared from his social media entirely. I'm listening, I said. Full reinstatement. Chief Technology Officer. Equity package. Name your salary. The offer was generous. More than generous, it was desperate. But I'd already made my choice the moment Richard called me replaceable. No, I said simply. Jane, please. Be reasonable. We can work this out. I am being reasonable. Check your email. I'd sent the message 20 minutes earlier, a single PDF attachment with a cover letter that read, Notice of License Termination. Effective immediately, Caldwell Dynamics no longer has authorization to use, modify, or distribute Genesis core architecture or any derivative works. The silence on the other end stretched like a taut wire about to snap. You can't do this, Heather finally whispered. The Pentagon contract, the investors, the employees. Should have thought of that before calling me replaceable. The meeting was set for the next morning at the Meridian Club, one of those old money establishments where deals worth more than small countries' GDP were discussed over artisanal coffee and handshakes that carried the weight of empires. Victoria Sterling sat across from me, her silver hair immaculate, her presence commanding enough to stop conversations at neighboring tables. Sterling Technologies had been Caldwell's biggest competitor for years, always one step behind because they lacked what I'd built. Ms. Chun, she said, extending a hand adorned with a simple platinum band, I've been following your work for some time. Impressive doesn't begin to cover it. I settled into the leather chair, spine straight despite the exhaustion weighing on my shoulders. You've seen the patent filing? Indeed. Genesis Core under Chen Innovations. Quite the strategic move. Her eyes locked on mine, sharp as surgical steel. What's your price? For a moment, I just breathed. After everything, 9 years of sacrifice, broken promises, watching my father's medical bills pile up like storm clouds, someone was finally asking what I was worth. I'm not interested in a buyout, I said slowly. I'm interested in a partnership. Full integration of Genesis into Sterling's defense portfolio. I retain creative control and patent ownership. 50-50 revenue split. Victoria's lips curved into something that might have been a smile. You're thinking bigger than Caldwell ever did. Good. She slid a folder across the table. Inside was a preliminary term sheet with numbers that made my breath catch. Figures that would cover Dad's treatment 10 times over and still leave enough to fund my own research lab. One condition, I added. My father's medical expenses come off the top. Non-negotiable. Done, Victoria said without hesitation. Then she leaned forward, and I saw something in her eyes that Richard had never possessed, respect. We don't just want your code, Jane. We want you. Chief Innovation Officer, Sterling Technologies. Full creative control, unlimited research budget, your name on the door. I signed the preliminary agreement with a hand that no longer trembled. By 9 a.m. the next morning, the news had broken across every financial network. Sterling Technologies acquires Genesis AI architecture in $1.8 billion deal. Caldwell Dynamics stock in freefall after loss of core technology. CEO Richard Caldwell steps down amid corporate crisis. I was sitting in my new office, glass walls, city views, and a nameplate that read Dr. Jane Chin, Chief Innovation Officer, when my phone buzzed with a final text from Richard. You've destroyed everything we built together. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, We never built anything together, Richard. I built it. You just put your name on it. Then I blocked his number and got back to work. The Pentagon contract went to Sterling Technologies. Genesis 2.0, built on my original architecture but freed from corporate constraints, exceeded every performance benchmark by margins that made headlines. Dylan Caldwell was last seen working at a startup that made productivity apps for small businesses. His LinkedIn profile no longer mentioned AI or machine learning. Richard's golden parachute softened his landing, but Caldwell Dynamics never recovered. The company was eventually sold for parts to a tech conglomerate that stripped it for patents and office furniture. As for me, I kept the small cactus from my old desk. It sits on my windowsill now, thriving in the natural light of an office that truly belongs to me. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply know your worth, and have the courage to walk away when others don't recognize it. They thought I was replaceable. They were wrong. Have you ever been underestimated or told you were replaceable? Share your story in the comments. Sometimes losing what you thought was everything is just the beginning of something far greater.